Throughout the natural history of the Earth, great biological paradigms have been overturned again and again. As we go back and look through time, we see that the asteroid strike dethroned the dinosaurs and allowed the mammals to diversify and usurp them as the dominant vertebrate. We see plants evolving lignin, and then millions of years later, we see fungi evolve ways to break that lignin down. We see the first fish step from the sea to colonize dry land, and when the methanogens were largely destroyed by the advent of oxygen-producing cyanobacteria. It is these methanogens that I want to take a closer look at. Methanogens are microbes, typically archaea, that can produce methane, or CH4, through their metabolism. The ability to generate methane this way is ancient. It's one of the oldest biochemical pathways that earthly life forms have ever evolved. Researchers have tried to determine how old the archaeal methanogens are, but it's no easy feat. It's quite tricky. The fossils of these archaea are extremely hard to find, and when you're looking 3.5 billion years back in time, there's going to be very few actual fossilized cells remaining. This far back in time, the best evidence we have of these methanogens is the chemical signatures they leave behind on rocks and in the rest of the environment. And based on these chemical signatures, it's been determined that methanogenic archaea likely existed at least 3.5 billion years ago. But there are virtually no fossilized cellular remains from this far back, at least until recently. And this takes us to today's science news. Researchers at the University of Bologna in Italy believe they've identified fossilized strands or filaments of 3.42 billion year old microbial communities, which may be the oldest archaean microbes ever discovered. These filamentous fossils were excavated from a sub-seafloor hydrothermal vein system in the Barberton Greenstone Belt of South Africa around 10 years ago, and they've recently become the subject of an intensive structural and chemical analysis. Some scientists are skeptical that this is an actual organic fossil, with some suggesting that it could be a natural geological formation. But the research team, led by geobiologist Barbara Cavallazzi, is confident that they've identified fossilized microbes based on several lines of evidence. In their paper, they describe the observations they made that led them to this fossilized microbe conclusion. The fossils have structural features similar to other known fossilized biofilms, such as disarticulation, which is, for example, seen where cells divide. Other features are indicative of rapid silicification, or infusion with silicate compounds leading to fossilization, which is, quote, to be expected of Paleoarchean silica-saturated hydrothermal systems, unquote. Furthermore, they identified semi-ordered clumps of carbon that are, quote, consistent with ancient permineralized kerogenous cellular remains, unquote. They also identified carbonaceous residues that they speculate could be a kind of external layer or shell for the cells. Chemical analysis of these filaments down to the strange cell shells suggested similarities to other known fossils in the Barberton Greenstone Belt area. The presence of most elements except phosphorus, quote, suggests the presence of an organic heterocyclic sulfide as previously detected in other Precambrian microfossils, unquote. The presence of nickel-containing organic chemicals had some skeptical researchers thinking this was a geological formation, but the authors argue that this is, quote, consistent with primordial metabolisms, unquote, in the sense that these microbes likely possessed nickel-containing enzymes. Nickel-containing enzymes are used extensively in methanogenic processes, so these methanogens tend to have a higher level of nickel in their bodies than other microbes. The researchers measured levels of nickel that were similar to those seen in modern methanogens and similar to those seen in other samples from around 3.3 billion years ago. And to tie all of this together, the semi-ordered clusters of carbon, the nickel concentrations, and the filaments themselves were all spatially associated with the biofilms plastered into specific regions of the sub-seafloor hydrothermal vein habitat. And as if this wasn't enough, they also analyzed the habitat itself, and they found remarkable similarities between it and modern hydrothermal vent habitats. The researchers say, quote, these environments, typified by moderate hydrothermal temperature, abundant availability of essential nutrients, and steep redox and pH gradients, would have provided the necessary ingredients and free energy to sustain biofilms comprised of acetogens, methanogens, methanotrophs, and heterotrophs." Unquote. Alright, you guys. So this was a neat little study of a cool little fossil, of a sweet little Precambrian subsea floor hydrothermal vent-dwelling methanogenic archaeal microbial community. It's super cool that they probably found the oldest archaea ever. But something that I also found really fascinating about this was the fact that some of these microbial communities, the chemical systems, the ecological dynamics, they haven't changed. The hydrothermal vent habitats have remained more or less the same for 3.5 billion years. And it really looks like the microbial communities that live there have also been playing more or less the same game for 3.5 billion years. It's really wild to think about how, while life closer to the surface was undergoing a symphony of diversification events, creating countless millions of species over these billions of years, and with all manner of different forms and behaviors and lifestyles and ecological niches, and all of this is changing according to evolutionary whims, and it gets scrambled every now and then by volcanoes and asteroid strikes. There's all this action going on. And the whole time, during this whole 3.5 billion years of the greatest show on Earth, creating the most biological diversity that the cosmos has ever seen, the whole time, these little methanogenic archaea have been minding their business in the darkness beneath the seafloor, doing the same thing, living the same way for 3.42 billion years. Amazing.